Hello, hello, and welcome to the Weeder Life podcast. I'm your host, Erica Weederlight, and I am the CEO and founder of We the Light. I help humans who feel inadequate, broken, self-conscious, and shamed around their sexuality to reclaim their aliveness, their power, and to have a renewed relationship to pleasure while preparing themselves to feel hella confident to date others and themselves. AKA, I'm guiding people to live their #best lives. I have to give you a fair warning. I do unfortunately swear like a drunken sailor, so if you do have little ones by you, just be sure to pop in some earbuds. All right, friends, let's buckle up and let's rock it to this week's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am super psyched for this episode today. This amazing human is on, and I am so jazzed, so psyched to have the opportunity to talk to this amazing human, Terry Tucker. I rewrote his bio probably 4 times because I was like, Terry's done this. And I'm, regardless of what is on his resume or his past, this is just an amazing person that is committed to the work, that really lives his life in so much integrity and is truly an inspiration for all. And before we get into meeting the amazing Terry Tucker, I just want to give you, because I give you a little backstory about Terry. So Terry is an amazing motivational speaker, and he's also the author of Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. Terry has had such an interesting career. He has worn so many professional hats, including being a marketing executive, hospital administrator, working in undercover narcotics, which is amazing and fascinating, SWAT team hostage negotiator, and business owner. This person is so cool. And his most recent experience, and the one that touched me and moved me the most, is that he is a cancer warrior and just a king of mindset. And he lives and he teaches all of his work, and you could check him out. We'll talk about this later. Go to his website, and his work is called Motivational Check. Again, that's Motivational Check. His website, his work. He's just a profound human. So without further ado, welcome, Terry. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Eric. I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Yes. And the thing, like I said, your bio is just so impressive and amazing, and you've worn so many professional hats and just hats as a human. But the thing that struck out to me the most was your journey with cancer. Yeah. And something that I'm like, whoa, that blew me away is I read and I heard many times that you explained, like, you felt like, listen, I have 2 options. Like, I can be taken by this pain and this grief, where there is a space for that, to feel the grief and feel the pain, but I could be completely taken by that, or I can, work with this, I can dance with this, I can have a relationship to it. And it sounds like you really chose the latter. And you fight for fight sounds so aggressive, but you know what I mean. You fight for your mind, but it's true. You fight for your mindset and really living. So can you talk to us? I know that's kind of a big question, but can you talk about, like, how you fight to live? You're really living a life that feels good to you and fighting with mindset, all those things that just really blew me away. I was so impressed by you.
Well, thank you. I hope I can live up to, I listen to you talk about what I've done in my life, and, I sort of sit here and I think, geez, one of these days I got to figure out what I'm going to do when I grow up, kind of thing. I have worn a ton of hats. But so 2012, I guess, let me sort of start at the beginning. I was a high school girls basketball coach in Texas, and I had a callus break open on the bottom of my foot, right below my 3rd toe. And being a coach, I didn't really think about it initially because you're on your feet a lot. But after a couple of weeks of it not healing, I went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine, and he took an x-ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a little cyst in there, and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it, no dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern, but he sent it off to pathology. And 2 weeks later, I get this call from him. And as I mentioned, he was a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he was having explaining to me what was happening, the more frightened I was becoming. And so finally, he just kind of laid it out for him, hit me right between the eyes. He said, Terry, I've been a physician for 25 years. I have never seen this form of cancer. You have a rare form of melanoma. The that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. And I recommend you go to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston and be treated. And so that started I've got to deal with my mind. I've got to control my mind, because I certainly went through all the stages of grief. You know, you mentioned the word grief. You know, I was in denial. It's like, no, this possibly can't be. I've done everything right in my life. How could I possibly have cancer? You know, and then you get mad because it's like, I have done everything right in my life and I still got cancer. You know, and then you start to bargain. You bargain with God. You know, hey, look, if you let me live to my daughter's high school graduation, then I'll whatever. And so I went through all these stages, and then I just realized that these are the cards that I've been dealt. This sucks, but I need to embrace the suck. And these are the cards that I've been dealt, and I'm going to have to play them to the best of my ability. And I have bad days. You know, there's no S on my chest. I don't wear a cape and fly around with magical powers or anything. I have bad days. I cry, I get down, I get depressed. I just choose not to stay in that. And I guess I'll end it in this long-winded answer with this. We're all going to experience pain in our lives. And it doesn't have to be cancer pain. It doesn't have to be any kind of an illness. You could flunk a test at school, or break up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, or not get the promotion at work that you think you deserve. Pain is inevitable. Suffering, on the other hand, suffering's optional. Suffering's what you do with that pain. Do you take it and use it to make you a stronger, more determined individual? Or do you wallow in it and want people to feel sorry for you and feel sorry for yourself? It's a choice. Life doesn't owe you anything. Life isn't going to say, oh, Terry, that's too bad. I'm going to make things better for you. Life doesn't do that. Sorry. If you want something in life, figure out what that is, pull what you need out of yourself to do it, and go after it with dogged determination. That's the only way you're going to get what you want out of life.
There's so many good nuggets in that statement. And I'm laughing because when I was listening to other podcasts you've done and researching you, I loved what you talked about with the differentiation of suffering and pain. And actually, an episode I did prior with my friend Po Hung, she literally word for word said the same thing. And she said, you know, we kind of blur the lines between suffering and pain. And we're going to have pain. Like you said, like that is normal, and it would be blasphemy if we suggested that that's not, you know, like because I hate when people want to bypass, like pain is a part of human existence. And I love what you said to differentiate, like, of course there's going to be pain, of course there's going to be sadness and grief and all the shades of that, but when it turns into suffering, especially perpetually suffering, that's when it starts to like, okay, how am I going to dance with this? How am I going to look at this? And I love that you really have a relationship to that you're like, okay, I'm in pain right now, but I'm noticing when I'm going into suffering land. So I know for me, mindset's a huge piece of my practice and what I teach my clients, and also for me. And I am a sufferer of anxiety. It's gotten much better, but a huge component of anxiety for me was mindset, because my brain is so cute and wants to go to the worst case scenario and wants to go to fear and spirals out. And mindset to me has been like, Erica, you know, like helped me lovingly get back to truth, get back to my mission, get back to love, and not spiral out with information that may not be true. So can you talk to us about like mindset, your relationship to mindset? What the hell does that mean, you know, for you? Because everyone's relationship to mindset is different. Like, can you talk about like your relationship to mindset, and like how, if someone's totally new to this, like how would they approach mindset?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I you know, a lot of the examples I use are sports related or hospital nursing related, because that's what I know. And that's what I deal with a lot. And so when you were saying that, I was thinking back to Bobby Knight used to be the basketball coach at the University of Indiana. And I had a friend of mine who I played against in high school, went on to play for Knight, won a national championship with him, and went on to play professional basketball in the NBA. And Knight had a saying that went like this: mental is to physical as 4 is to 1. So here's this great coach teaching these elite athletes how to use their body, you know, to excel at the game of basketball. But what that quote really said was, your mind, your brain is 4 times more important than your physical body is. So yep. I think that's a great way to look at it. And I think the other thing is that, you know, as I said, I get down, I get depressed, I have bad days. I'm not superhuman. I'm just a guy, you know. And so when that happens, I think of two stories that I heard that kind of dovetail with each other. One was about a professor back in the 1950s at Johns Hopkins University. And this is going to sound really weird, so hang with me here on this.
I'm right? With it. I'm on the journey with you.
This professor did an experiment, and it was a very simple experiment. He took rats and he put them in a tank of water that was over their head. And he wanted to see how long the rats could tread water. And the average rat treaded water for about 15 minutes. And then just as the rats were getting ready to sink and drown, he reached in, grabbed them, pulled them out, dried them off, let them rest for a while. And then he took those exact same rats and put them back in that same tank of water. And the second time around, those rats treaded water for 60 hours. Think about that. 15 minutes. That's all I can do. 15 minutes. I'm at the end of my rope. I'm going to sink and drown. Second time around, 60 hours, which says to me two things. Number one, the importance of hope in our lives. We have to believe that whatever we're going through, whatever we're experiencing, whatever road we're traveling is going to someday, maybe not today, maybe not next month, maybe not next year, but someday is going to lead us to a better place. That's number one. And number two, just how much more our physical bodies can handle than we ever think they can. So that story sort of dovetails in with the second story, which I have a friend of mine who's a former Navy SEAL, which is a group of the military, some of the toughest men in the world. And these guys talk about their 40% rule. And basically what that says is if you're at the end of your rope, you can't go on, you think you're going to quit, you're only at 40% of your maximum. And you still have another 60% left in reserve to give to yourself. So whenever you think you can't go on, whenever you think, oh, this is terrible, this is horrible, I can't do this, think about those two stories, because that's what I think about. Like, wait a minute. No, this sucks today. I'm tired. I hurt. I don't feel good. But you know what? I have so much more left to give to myself. Just tell your mind that and then make your body do it, because your body can. Your body can handle so much. Trust me. I've had my foot amputated. I've had my leg amputated. I've had all this. You just keep going because you realize you have so much more left to give to yourself.
Yes, that's so good. It's funny. I'm a practitioner here and there because there's some, not everything's perfect, but of Kundalini yoga, and the philosophies that are, pure and from a good place, are great. The other stuff that's all sticky, obviously I let go, and that's, you know the deal. But in Kundalini yoga, so many of the practices are keep up. There's actually an exercise, where you're pumping your arms. And you're pumping and you're like, I possibly cannot. Like, I physically, and you tell yourself, and you're like, I hate this. You go through the whole thing, and they say, keep up with keeping up. And that to me was such a profound healing that I am much bigger, much more capable than I ever think I was. It's this thing of like, we're so much bigger than we think we are. Sometimes we feel so, especially when our mindset is more negative, we feel so small and so helpless. But when you're like, I'm going to keep up, I'm going to keep showing up, even though it feels hard. And, obviously we don't want to put ourselves in toxic situations, but you know the deal. We realize, oh, I'm so much stronger. I'm so much more resilient. I'm so much more powerful than I ever thought I was. And I think I'm so grateful that you teach that. And that's one of your, one of the many principles that you teach. And something else that I love about you and your mission is that it sounds like you were reminded what life was about. I think we get a little spoiled and a little ignorant sometimes, of like, oh, I'm going to live till 95 and I'm going to do this, this, and this. And we kind of lose focus. And I'm sure for you that's affected, right? Like, I'm sure that's like, hey, wow, I have today. I'm going to live today. So can you talk to us about like living and what's that like for you? And how do you, just talking about the theme of living and how that's changed your perspective.
Yeah. I guess maybe a better way for me to talk about that is to talk about dying.
Yep. I think it's necessary. Yeah.
And when back in 2020, I had my leg amputated and I also found I had tumors in my lungs, and I am undergoing therapy still for the tumors in my lungs. And after I had my leg amputated, but before I started chemotherapy, I went with my wife to the mortuary, to the cemetery, and to the church, and I planned my funeral. And, you know, I speak on the topic of motivation moving forward. I'm on these podcasts, you know, talking about that. And so when I let it out there that I had planned my funeral, I sort of got some brushback from people that were like, you know, don't you think that's kind of defeatist? And, you know, I kind of looked at them like, well, the last time I checked, we're all going to die. I don't think anybody's working on a cure for life right now. So,
Right.
so I was like, you know, everybody dies, but not everybody really lives. And, you know, I heard a Native American Blackfoot proverb years ago that I absolutely love. And it went like this: when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life. And I think those are the important words in this quote. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. And that's what I want. And that's what I think we all can be, or we all can have, if we live our life. My gifts and talents are not your gifts and talents, are not your mother's gifts and talents, are not my brother's gifts and talents. We are all unique in our gifts and our talents. And so we need to find the purpose for which we were put on the face of this earth, use our unique gifts and talents to live that reason. And if you do, at the end of your life, death is not nearly as scary as opposed to those people who kind of live a casual life. And as a result of living that casual life, their goals, their dreams, their ambitions become a casualty of that unplanned living. So I think living gets you to the point where death is not nearly as scary. It's more like, okay, it's the next stage of life. We think it's the end of life. But in a way, for me, I have a very deep faith in God. I don't think that. I'm almost excited to see what's on the other side of this life. And hopefully it's going to be something even better than what we've got here.
Yeah, that's so good. I want to, frame that for a second before we move on. I personally, I've had a lot of, obviously not myself, but lots of family members and friends and relative, a lot of death in my life. And it's obviously caused me, we'll say, suffering, like pain and honestly suffering. And I've rubbed up against death a lot, again, not for myself, but for other people. And it has been absolutely horrendous. And I feel blessed that I have a similar mindset to you, what you're talking about, because again, some days I slip and I'm like, I'm unconscious, you know the deal, whatever. But it reminds me of, this time is precious. I don't know how long I'm going to have. I could go tomorrow. I mean, God willing, no, but I could go tomorrow, I want to live. And that's something that's always been a huge component for me. And what I love, what you teach is I want to live full out. I don't want to die with the music inside of me. You know what I mean? I want to turn every rock I could turn. I want to live full out. I want to feel it all. I want to be present to it all. And I love that's what you're saying, because so often it's so easy to go on autopilot and shut down and be like, now, which, fine, but now I go to work today. Now I drink, eat the same turkey sandwich for lunch every day, drink the wine, which that's fine. There's a place for that. But I think inviting some, this sounds silly, but inviting some more magic or remembering in is so crucial. And I think that I love what you said. I think that's why we fear death, because we're not really, the people that really, really live are like, I lived, I turned over every rock, but there's a lot, like you said, a lot of people, and that's okay, but that don't fully live out loud, or oh, I'm so scared. I'm so scared because I haven't fully lived. So I love that you said that. That is so helpful and important. And out of curiosity, because I know everyone has different flavors, everyone's mission's different, everyone's purpose is different. We'll talk about that in a second, but what's your flavor of living? What brings you, I'm just curious, what brings you joy? What makes you happy? How are you I'm going to show up today and really live? What does that look like for you?
I guess I can probably answer that in one word. I would say service. I think we're all supposed to, or destined to, serve. I mean, if you believe in God and things like that, to serve your creator. If you don't, certainly to serve your fellow man. How can your unique gifts and talents be used to make my life better, to make somebody else's life better? And I think another part of, when we're in those ugly and dark and down and gloomy places, we're looking internally, we're looking inside, and, oh, woe is me, and this is terrible. And what I think what helps me, and I guess I would offer this to you and your audience as well, is to take that inward looking and find somewhere to look outward. Find somebody to go and help. Because if you do, now you're not focusing on your problems and your issues and feeling down and depressed. You're using your gifts and talents to help another human being. So your focus is no longer on you, your focus is on somebody else. And that's part of serving. And not only is it good for the other person, but now it's good for you because you're not so focused on yourself. You're more focused on something external that you can make a difference and make a positive difference in somebody else's life.
Yes, I'm obsessed with that. And thank you for saying that because for me, that's where I try to teach my clients. I'll say a brief little story is when I was first teaching and doing this work, it's so much of it is internal and self-care and nourishing yourself and self-soothing and all that good stuff. And I remember I had a conversation years back with my mom. She's a very in her own very specific way, very faith-driven person. And we were talking, kind of about all this stuff. And she's like, I think a component of your work that you're missing is teaching people to kind of get out of themselves. And it was such a little bit of a, excuse my French, a mind fuck for me because I was teaching people for so many years, which is okay, but like self-love, nourish yourself, take care of yourself. And she's like, yes, and. She's like, there's an end. She's like, I love your work. I love what you're doing. She's like, but you're missing she's like, in my personal opinion, take it or leave it. And I was like, damn it. I was so mad. I was like, you got me good because you missed a blind spot for me because there's an end. And I think that's something that I really try to nourish within my clients, within my audience of let's talk about really deep self-care. Let's talk about really healthy mindset and being very internal, right? And having a good relationship to ourselves and yes. And there's something so powerful. First of all, it's so important to help others, et cetera, but there's something so healing and powerful that sometimes the spiritual self/self-help world doesn't talk about is helping others because that is so healing. Like that, you remove sometimes yourself from our, sometimes justified dramas and tragedies, and we can get out of that for a second, be like, wait, this person in front of me is right here. I want to be with them. I want to love up on them. I want to serve. And I'm so glad because this isn't really part of the conversation. Usually it's like me, my growth, which God bless. Like if you are growing, you can help others. But I'm so glad that you voiced the service aspect because that is huge for the community, the world at large, but also for our personal transformation because then we can get out of our own way. Yeah. Like it's what I mean? It gets us out of our own way instead of like me, and I'm going to therapize and I'm going to diagnose myself every second. It's like, yes, there's a space for that. Or taking care of yourself and I want to serve. I want to be of service. I want to help people. I want to hold people. So that makes me really happy that you jammed out on that because I think that's a super important facet that we sometimes overlook. Actually, we overlook a lot.
It is. And, and I always say to people, you're unique, but you're not special. Everybody thinks they're special. It's all about me. I'm really, look at me. You're unique, but you're not really that special. And I mean, I even go back just to the Bible. I mean, think about it. God made man. And then God realized it's not good for man to be alone. So man's going to sleep. I'm taking a rib. I'm making woman. And that's not necessarily about, man and woman as much as it is, I think, about us being interdependent on each other. We don't do well by ourselves. We don't do well when it's just all about us. We do better when we're together. I mean, me individually, I don't know the answer. Us collectively can figure out the answer. So I think it's incredibly important for us to realize not only do we want to help other people, but we want to be around other people. I want to, this is fun for me, and I'm sure it's the same way for you because you get to meet new people. You get to learn. I don't have all the answers. I'm the first person to tell you this works for me, but I'm not going to tell you it works for you. Figure out what works for you. Hey, I talked to you. I learned something. Okay, I can apply that in my life. That's what life is about. It's about us, not about you individually.
Yes, that is so So profound, so helpful. So thank you for that. Service is a huge component of this conversation. And it's funny, I remember when I was starting to do this work or continuing my education, the teacher said, like, listen, you're going to get great information in this classroom. You're going to get tools, you're going to get tips. Great. She's like, but there's nothing like the community. And you can't buy that. She was like, listen, you're going to get so much in this classroom. And the community is the thing that is I can't, like, that is the deep healing, because I can't give you all the answers. She's like, but this person from this walk of life can, and this like, collectively we heal, collectively we grow, we rise, etc. And I think we overlook, right now, because everything's so fast paced and almost, I always say, like, Instagrammable. It's like bite size, like self-care, self-love, and it's kind of like we don't dive deep on like what that actually means. We're missing the community aspect. And so I love that that's a piece of your work. And also something that I want to go back to is how you talk about mission and purpose. And can you talk to us about, because I don't know, I'm going to assume that even if your mission is to spread joy, that is so important to come back to, because when we're not aligned, and I'll let you take the lead on this, but at least from my perspective, it's like when I don't have a intention to come back to, I'm kind of just like free flowing, and I'm just waking up every day and like that, like I don't know what to do, like I guess I should just follow the lead or whatever. And so I think for me, and I want to hear your opinion, like for mission and purpose, whether how quote unquote big or glamorous or small it is, I think it helps us get back on track of like, this is how I want to live. This is how I want to serve. So can you talk to us about like your relationship to mission and purpose and all that good stuff?
Yeah, I think and I guess I'll qualify what I'm going to say with this. A lot of times, we think our purpose or our why or our mission, whatever you want to call it in life, has to be what you do for a living. My job has to be my purpose. It doesn't. I mean, your job can be over here and it's something you do to pay the bills, but your purpose or your why is to write or to be a podcaster or, to be, I don't know, an activist, whatever. And I always say this to young people, especially, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be the things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them. So I think it's very important for us to search for our purpose with an open heart. And, a lot of times people, they go down the line, I'm working towards something. This is hard. I'm tired. I'm good. I'm just going to stay right here. And so, and those are the people that live that casual life that, it's kind of like the old movie Groundhog's Day. It's the same, like you say, I'm eating a turkey sandwich. I'm going to work. I'm doing the same thing every day. And I can't think how boring that must be to another, to you. It's like, oh, it's like, but people quit. They give up on their purpose. And this is going to sound kind of weird, but I remember, Colonel Sanders, everybody knows Kentucky Fried Chicken. Colonel Harlan Sanders started Kentucky Fried Chicken in his 60s. After he retired, he started that franchise. Now, I don't know if that was his purpose or his why in life. I'm going to assume that it was. But can you imagine if he would have, in his 30s said, no, I'm good. I'm comfortable right here. I'm not going to stretch. I'm not going to get outside that comfort zone. I'm just going to stay there. Then we would have never had Kentucky Fried Chicken. So, I mean, people have had, especially younger people, like, well, when will I know? I said, well, you may not know until you're 30 or you're 40 or you're 50. You've just got to keep going. You've got to open yourself up to different experiences and use your unique gifts and talents. I mean, there are things you like that I don't like. There are things I like that you don't like. And that's okay. So, I mean, but figure out what your purpose is, because that's the reason you were put on the face of this earth. And if you live that reason, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. At the end of your life, death isn't nearly as scary. It's those people that, I want another month, I want another year because I never did anything with my life. Well, you had the chance, you had the opportunity, you were given the time, you chose not to do something with your life. You chose to be comfortable. And I mean, and let's face it, we don't grow when we're comfortable. When things are easy, they're easy. We like it. It's good. The brain likes it. It's fine. But it's the old Shawshank Redemption quote of get busy living or get busy dying. You know what? Which hand are you in? Are you living or are you dying? you're dying if you're just
Yeah.
doing the same thing every single day and not stretching yourself.
It's so true. I have so many thoughts because I actually just did an episode right before this on contraction. And I was talking that like so often we shame ourselves when we're in a state of contraction, but I was like, actually, sometimes it's a cool thing when we're in a contraction because it means we stretched ourselves. And it means we pushed a boundary, from a safe place, but like pushed a boundary, and now we're just kind of like integrating, and now we're ready to stretch out again. So I love what you said about stretching and growing and being a little bit uncomfortable with that. And I just want to throw my hat in the ring here too, saying like, this is why I love teaching pleasure. Sexual, sensual, sure, but like pleasure as a foundational being every day, meaning pleasure of like, I'm with Terry right now and I'm really going to enjoy this conversation. I'm really going to enjoy this kombucha. Like we're going to jam out together. Like that form of pleasure. And that's why this work is so important for me, because I love teaching people this because sometimes it feels overwhelming to be like, quit your job. And that's not what we're suggesting, but like, quit your job and just, just go to Hawaii and live, But I think the teaching of the pleasure and starting to think about things that would expand you, is a nice way to slowly start to integrate some of this stuff. So maybe I'm not going to quit my job tomorrow, but how can I add a little bit more magic? How can I add a little bit more joy? How can I kind of be a little bit more of the author in my own life versus like, well, here it is, the saying like, it is what it is. Like, I'm just going to go on the ride. Like, how can I take a little bit of my power back? And I think once we start to practice that and it compounds, then we're like, okay, I've arrived at a new place. And like you said, like, I want to really be the author of my life and, co-collaborate with my life instead of like, it's just happening to me. So thank you for that. And I also really briefly wanted to highlight when you were talking about, the purpose thing. So I did a training years ago with Gabby Bernstein, which is a spiritual teacher. And the workshop was around being a spiritual teacher and like getting these people, to be like what we do, like motivational speakers and coaches and all that stuff. And she said, like, before we start, like, I just want to almost like de-glamorize, demystify, like, yes, it's so great that you all want to be motivational speakers. We all need you. Like, we need the coaches, we need the therapists, we need the speakers desperately. And I don't want you to get it fooled that that's the only way you can be like a light worker or someone that changes the planet. She's like, someone that is a banker or a janitor or a stay-at-home mom is just as valuable in changing this planet as you are. Like, keep doing this because it's important work. And to remember that no matter what our career is, if we have one, if we don't, we all can do this work and deeply transform, it sounds corny, but like deeply transform the planet, but truly deeply transform the planet by showing up in our energy. And I just wanted to frame that sometimes we feel like I just have a normal job. So like I'll save being a light worker or whatever you want to call it. Like I'll save that for someone else. It's like, no, this is available for all of us. And we all need to, ideally we all need to show up for this mission because I mean, especially now this planet desperately needs it.
You're right. I guess I would take that maybe a step further because I think a lot of times we judge who we think, as you say, is a light worker. We're looking at like, I want this person who's running this company or this person who holds themselves out as a teacher or a coach or whatever. I remember our daughter is a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, and there was a janitor at the school in the dorms that would, clean the bathrooms and do that kind of stuff. And these kids sort of ignored him. It was like, you're the janitor. What could you? That janitor was a Medal of Honor winner. That janitor had been in war, had been in combat, and never got out there and said, hey, look, I've got a lot to offer you kids, but you just treat me as I'm the janitor. Or I'm the cook, or I'm the, that person is beneath me. That person is below me. And I remember reading a story one time where a professor gave a 4-question test. And he's like, here are 3 questions you need to answer. And here's the 4th. And the 4th one was, the question was, what's the name of the janitor who cleans up in here every day after class? And like 99% of the people fail. They're like, I don't know. I don't know that person. You see that person every day, but you ignore them because you think, well, they're the janitor. They can't possibly teach me anything. Well, my God,
yes.
From our daughter's perspective, the guy was a janitor. He was a Medal of Honor winner. I mean, that's the highest award you can get in the military. Are you kidding? This guy could have taught you all kinds of things, but you ignored him. You didn't even realize who he was. You never asked him, hey, what's your name? What's your story? We all have a story. I remember reading an article a couple of weeks ago that said 84% of Americans believe that they want to write a book. Less than 1% ever do.
Wow. That's also a loving, triggering narrative for me, because I'm like, shit, I want to write a book. So I'm like, all right, Erica, get writing. I love it. I want to throw it back to, she keeps coming up in this episode, but I think it's relevant because you guys have, there's some similarities with the faith and cancer, but I'm going to throw it back to my mom. It's funny, we always were taught growing up, she said, you will always give the same respect, the same love and appreciation for the janitor to the CEO. She's like, I do not care who it is. You will give them the same respect. You will, and that was always a lesson. And I watched her treat everyone equally. And to even piggyback on that, so my mom, which is so funny because she's like Fran Dresser, so it's just a comical thing that happened, was a CCD teacher, which is just hilarious. Like, just that in itself could be an SNL skit. But so it's just so funny. I'm like, oh my gosh. But she actually would throw down great nuggets where I was like, whoa. And I remember she said, and she told our class, whoever you are, kind of what we're talking about, like whoever you think less of, or you have prejudices, or whoever you're holding like some judgment on, I dare you, what if God, or we could replace that to God, Goddess, universe, whatever works for people, what if that was what God looked like? Or what if and that blew people's mind? Because we have this idea of what, and we're going into, a different zone here, but I think you get what I'm saying, is that it was like, no, like everyone matters. Everyone should be part of this conversation. Everyone is valuable. And she said, so those people that you're holding prejudices against, or you're judging, or you think are less than, I dare you to push yourself and say, what if that was God? Wouldn't you love them? Wouldn't you? And that always stuck with me, that it's, so stereotypical, but like, treat people with respect, treat people how you want to be treated. And like you said, there's so much, we're missing out on half of life talking about living when we're just like, I'm going to talk to these type of people. I'm going to surround myself with these types of people. There's so much goodness that we're passing up on when we just, it just feels so gross when people become disposable, but that's a other conversation. But thank you for highlighting that, because I think that's also part of living.
It is.
Deep living is to be surrounded by all different walks of life and communicate with one another and to learn from one another. I think that is deeply part of actually really living. So thank you for that.
Sure. I mean, it's funny you said that. I remember back when I was a little kid, when I was a kid, there were only two ways to die. One was natural causes, and the other one was to talk back to your parents. So, you did. I mean, our parents, it sounds like your parents as well, taught you the necessity of respect for everybody. I grew up, every adult that I came in contact with, I had to answer their questions, yes, ma'am, no, sir, yes, sir. There was respect that was taught that I'm not so sure is taught today. Lou Holtz is a football coach at Notre Dame, or was a football coach at Notre Dame. And he was asked by a reporter, what's the difference between players today versus players 50 years ago? And I wrote this down, so I want to make sure I get it right. He said,
yes.
He said the players today are concerned with their rights and their privileges, whereas the players 50 years ago were concerned with their obligations and their responsibilities. So, again, that goes back to what we're talking about. It's all about me. It's all about my rights and my privileges. Whereas 50 years ago, no, it's about how can I make a difference? How can I use my obligations, my responsibility to help the world? And you think about all those young men and young women that, died during World War II who never got a chance to live, but felt that they were part of something that was bigger than themselves.
Right. It's a really powerful conversation. And I know you talk a lot frequently about these like 4 truths of living like a really well life. Like, can you talk to us about like those 4 truths of living a fulfilling life?
Sure. So these are things that I guess I've kind of come to understand over these last 10 years and certainly I guess over my entire life. And I call them sort of the bedrock of my soul. They're just a good place to build a life off of, to build a quality life off of. And I have them right here on my desk. They're on a Post-it note. I've written them down there. They're one sentence each. And so the first one is control your mind or your mind will control you. The second one is embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life and use that pain and difficulty to make you a stronger and more determined individual. The third one is more of a legacy truth. I think it's important for all of us to kind of look at sort of the end game, regardless of what stage in life we are. And the third one is this: what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then the fourth one, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. As long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. So those are just, I use those. Am I going to do this therapy? Am I going to get involved in this project? I use those to help guide me, I guess, to things that are positive, that are productive in my life. And like, yeah, I don't want to do that. That's not part of who I am. I'm going to do this over here instead.
Yeah, that's so good. And I have to, because it's my favorite, I have to highlight the first one, which is mindset. And I have, it's just because it's so good. But I have a friend, Glenn, who's from Jamaica, and he uses, there's like, I don't want to say a proverb, but a saying that they use a lot. And he always says it to me. And every time I'm like, ugh, I'm like spiraling out, excuse me, as I spit, because I'm like, whoa, spiraling out. He'll sit me down and say, girl, thoughts kill or thoughts cure. Thoughts kill, and now because I've known him for so many years, he's like, what's the saying? Now he knows that I'm like, I know. So he knows that, and it is so true. And I'm sure that you've, seen this, or the listeners have heard this experiment before, where they experiment. And I've talked about this before with, with a plant or a fruit, and the deal. It's like they take two fruits or two plants or, whatever, two flowers. And the experiment is one of the fruits, one of the flowers. They do the same thing, the same amount of water, same amount of light, but one of them they talk horribly to. And they're like, you're horrible, they neglect it, horrible self-talk. And the other one, again, same food, light, water, is they're like, you're amazing, you're growing, I'm so proud of you. And they give them affirmations. And they said what's so interesting is the one that they have the negative self-talk to dies immediately. And the one that is filled with love and appreciation is the one that blooms. And that's so powerful, because I think sometimes in society, because we can't see it, we're like, yeah, mindset sounds nice. But anyway, like it's easy for us to neglect it because we can't really see it. So we're like, anyway. But it is like scientifically proven over and over how profound a mindset filled with nourishing thoughts and positivity can truly transform your life.
It can. I mean, all our cells are interconnected. So, I mean, if your brain is putting, negative thoughts out there, then those negative thoughts permeate, your body. I mean, I remember when I was in high school, I had 3 knee surgeries. And I remember when I went back playing basketball, my brain started putting all this negative garbage into me, like, oh, hey, you had 3 surgeries. You're probably a step slower, and college coaches aren't going to be interested in recruiting you. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm still playing at an elite level, and coaches are still contacting me about potentially playing for their college or university, on a basketball scholarship. So I had to one, recognize that those negative thoughts were coming in, and then 2, flip the switch, change the narrative to something positive. And if you think about it, your brain can hold one thought at a time. Why would you want to make that a negative thought? And, I think back to college where guys would go out and party the night before, a big test, and then they would come into the test and they'd be slightly hungover. And what do they always say? And we always do this. It's like, oh man, I don't feel good. I'm going to blow this test. Why would you say that to yourself? Why would you go immediately to the negative? Why wouldn't you say, hey, I came to class, every day. I learned this stuff. I paid attention. I'm going to do great on this test. But nobody does that. Everybody goes to the negative. And then what's going to happen? Of course, you're going to blow the test. You've told yourself you are going to blow the test. And I have had people literally come up to me and hear my story or know what I've gone through. And they're like, Terry, I could never do what you did. I could never go through what you went through. And sometimes I can be a smart aleck. And, so a lot of times I'll say to them, it's like, yeah, you're right. You couldn't, because in your head, you've already decided you couldn't do this. Why would you start anything in life with the attitude that, I'm going to blow this, or I'm not going to be successful, or this is going to be ugly. Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you at least give yourself the benefit of the doubt to be successful at it?
Yeah, I want to highlight what you said is deciding. And I remember I would get super pissed when I started this work because they're like, decide, decide, decide. And I'm like, stop, it's not that easy. It's not that easy. And I remember, and one of my coaches now, one of my mastermind coaches, she says, like, if a thought doesn't feel good, of course, obviously things happen and horrible things, which we're going to have to think about. So I'm not saying this excludes the bypassing conversation, but in general, when we're living, she's like, if there's thoughts that are going on that don't feel good, don't choose them. And it's as simple as choosing good thoughts. And I remember I was so resistant and I was so pissed to that and to like decide, and there's a big thing of like, deciding to feel good. And of course there's circumstances and we're not bypassing that, but decide to feel good, decide to have thoughts that nourish you, decide. And I remember I was so pissed. And sometimes I still do. I'm like, I don't want it to be that easy because it's something so easy can sometimes feel so hard.
Yeah.
But the great news is it is available for us. It's just, are we going to choose it? And that's what it comes down. And like you said, I'm glad that you said, like, I'm not Superman. Like some days I don't choose it.
Right. But we become what we think,
Yes.
So if we're thinking something, we're going to become that. And I always tell people, if you can see what you want in your mind's eye, if you can see that, if you can see yourself, living in that corner office and being the CEO of the company, then you can make that happen. If you can't see it, if you can't see that in your brain, it's never going to happen. Because if your brain can't see it, there's no way it can translate it to something, that's out there that you can actually do. So make sure that what you're thinking, what you're seeing is something you want, something positive. It goes back to your mentor. If it's something negative, get it out of there. It's like, no, I don't want that. I want something better for myself.
Yes. Oh my God, I have so much to say because mindset's such a good, important thing, but I'll wait on that because I wanted to ask you other questions because I'm like, oh, this is such a good topic. But I will ask you, you talk a lot about sustainable excellence. What does that mean? What does that mean for you? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, people always ask me, you wrote this book called Sustainable Excellence. What is excellence? And my response is, I don't know. And that literally is sort of the introduction of the book. What I think is excellent, you may not think is excellent. And excellence, kind of like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder. And so I think you have to determine for yourself, are you excellent? Is that person excellent? Is this event excellent? Or is that, yeah, they're good, but I don't think they're excellent. And so that's why I think it's important, for you've got to make that decision. It's not something you can say, well, that's excellent. Well, to me it is, but to you it's not. So you can't make that generalization. But let's say you get to, the pinnacle of whatever it is. You're in that corner office, you're running the company, you've won a national champion in a sport, whatever it is. What do we always do? We get to a point and we're like, yeah, here I am. I'm at the top. I'm good. Things are great. What am I going to do? I'm going to maintain. I'm going to maintain excellence. Well, guess what? As soon as you decide you're going to maintain it, you're not excellent anymore because somebody else down here is like, they're working their butt off and they're going to surpass you. So anytime you get to a point where you think you're excellent, you got to change. You got to do something different. You got to, it's like, if you're comfortable where you are, then you're in trouble because somebody else is working twice as hard as you are because, hey, you got there. So why do I need to work hard anymore? If you want to sustain excellence, you need to change and you need to continue to grow.
Yes, I think that was such a mind F for me was doing this work because I believed, oh, I'm just going to do this work and then I'm going to be good for life. And I was like, oh, I'm constantly finding in every area, great, babe, you've got to this level. Uh-huh. Like, that's great. And you should celebrate that. I'm so proud of you. Yes, yes, yes. And it's another initiation. Even right now, I was talking to a friend last night and we're like, okay, we've hit this level in this particular area of our life. What's the next iteration of this? What's the next initiation into this level? And that's across the board. And so I'm grateful for you that you speak on that it's normal to want to stretch and grow, that'll never end. Because I think sometimes there's a false belief of I'm going to hit the thing and then I'm going to be good. But this is a continuous journey that does not stop.
Yeah, you're always learning. I mean, think about when you first started your podcast? I mean, I remember when somebody asked me, say, would you be a guest on my podcast? I'm like, what's a podcast? I had no idea what that was. And then I was so nervous that I had all these notes all around the camera and everything, and they'd ask me a question and I'd be like, okay, let me read this. It's like, oh my God, I was terrible. I was horrible at this. But then the next one I got better. And then the next one I got better. And the next one I got better. And I remember I was talking to the publisher of my book and I told him, I said, I've done all these podcasts. I said, and I listen to every single one of them when they come out. And he's like, why do you do that? I said, because I want to learn how I can get better. Did I say too many times? Did I not make sense in what I said and things? I want to learn to get better. And he said, no, Terry, you don't understand. It's not about getting better. It's just about not sucking. And I'm like, oh, well, thanks for the title of my next book, just don't suck. But, I was like, no, that's not what it's about for me. That may be what it is for a lot of people. But for me, it's wanting to be better. It's wanting to continue to, how do I do this better? How do I make a better difference? How do I make this succinct and not talk so much and stuff like that? How do I get better at this? Because I want to be a good podcast guest for you so that your podcast is good and can grow. So it's not like, oh, hey, this is all about me. Just listen to me talk. No, this is about how I can share things with you, but also how I can make your podcast better and the next podcast I do better by making myself better.
Yes. And out of curiosity, just because I have to ask, like, what are you stretching into next? Like, what's your next iteration? What are you moving towards? Like, what are some goals? I hate the word goals, but you get what I'm saying. Like, what are some goals, desires that you're like, ooh, I'm ready. I want to stretch into this. Like, what's that looking like for you?
Well, a lot of it is I don't know if I wanted to, but what I'm working on now, and I signed a contract with an individual to develop a membership program. And, he was like, why are you giving this away? Why are you? I said, because that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm not looking to make money. I'm not looking to get famous. He said, no, you need to have a membership program. And I really, really resisted that. But there's sort of that old joke that says, when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So God never talked to me, but I think a lot of times what God does is put people in your path that make the same suggestion. Hey, you should write a book. Hey, you should write a book. Hey, I'm not an author. I should. But if enough people do it, I think I'm smart enough to sort of perk up and be like, maybe I ought to pay attention to that. And enough people started saying, no, Terry, you need to develop a membership program, because it's not just about your book. It's about all the other things that aren't in your book that you can teach, like the 4 truths. They're not in the book. There are things that, but you talk about them a lot. You need to let people know about that. I'm like, well, why don't I just talk about it? No, you can make money out of this. And I'm on disability. I make $12,000 a year. So it's like, no, you can, why are you giving this away? And I'm like, because I'm supposed to. So I really resisted wanting to do this, but that's the next iteration of sustainable excellence and motivational check and things like that. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, that's awesome. That I'm so grateful that you voice that you're resistant, because I think so often it's like we have a push-pull of like, I'm feeling called to this thing. And I think, thank you for normalizing that, because I think so often we beat ourselves up and we ping pong and go back and forth, because you're like, a part of me either wants this thing or is being called to this thing, but I'm having resistance. So thank you for normalizing that happens a lot. So usually towards places that we are supposed to go to. So thank you. And I think that's a good reminder for our listeners that if you are having resistance towards desires, towards goals, that's normal. Like, that is part of the process. It's just, how will we dance with that resistance? How will we shed that resistance? How will we lovingly move through the resistance? So that's awesome. I want to get to talking about how people could find you and all that. But before we do, you are such a wealth of knowledge. Is there anything else that any other insight, wisdom, anything else that you want to voice before we transition to talk about where people could find you?
Sure. I'll leave you with one more story, and I'm sure you're probably sick of my stories.
I know, I love it.
So I always have been a big fan of Westerns. Even growing up, my mom and dad used to let me stay up and watch, Gunsmoke and Bonanza and Wild Wild West. And I'm sure your audience is like, what's he talking about? I don't even know what those shows are. But those were kind of primetime shows that were Westerns, and I loved them. And 1993, the movie Tombstone came out, and it was a big blockbuster. It starred Val Kilmer as a man by the name of John Doc Holliday, and Kurt Russell as a man by the name of Wyatt Earp. Now, Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp were two living, breathing human beings who walked on the face of the earth. They're not made up characters just for the movie. Now, Doc was called Doc because he was a dentist by trade, but pretty much Doc Holliday was a gunslinger and a card shark. And Wyatt Earp, his entire life, had been a lawman. And so these two men from entirely opposite backgrounds formed this very close friendship. And at the end of the movie, the two men are talking about at the end of the movie, Doc Holliday is dying at a sanitarium in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, which is about 3 hours from my house. The real Doc Holliday died at that sanitarium. He's buried in the Glenwood Springs Cemetery. And Wyatt, at this point in his life, is destitute. He has no money, he has no job, he has no prospects for a job. So every day he comes to play cards with his friend, and the two men pass the time that way. And in this scene at the end of the movie, they're talking about what they want out of life. And Doc says, I was in love with my cousin when I was younger, but she joined a convent over the affair, but she's all that I ever wanted. And then he kind of looks at Wyatt and he says, what about you, Wyatt? What do you want? And Wyatt kind of nonchalantly says, I just want to lead a normal life. And Doc looks at him and says, there's no normal, there's just life, and get on with living yours. Erica, you and I probably know people. There's probably people out in the audience. They're sort of sitting back and like, when this happens, I'll have a normal life. When that occurs, I'll have a successful life. When this happens, I'll have a significant life. I guess what I would leave you with is this. Don't wait. Don't wait for life to come to you. Get out there, find the reason you were put on the face of this earth, and use your unique gifts and talents to live that reason. Because if you do, at the end of your life, I'm going to promise you two things. Number one, you're going to be a whole lot happier. And number two, you're going to have a whole lot more peace in your heart.
That's so good. Thank you. And just before we transition, I love that because I always tell people we have this story, right? Of like, when I lose the 10 pounds, I'll be happy. When I find the partner, then life will start. Then I love that you're like, no, let's get living now. Let's do that now. And I can't thank you enough. I could talk to you for hours because you're a wealth of information, but I want to, respect you and your time. I cannot thank you enough. But before we hop, how can people find you? I know you have a website, an amazing book. So talk to us where people can find you and how they can be in your universe.
Sure. So the book, Sustainable Excellence, you can pretty much find anywhere you can find a book online. It's available on Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, Apple iBooks. And then I have a website called Motivational Check. I think you mentioned that. Every day I put up a thought for the day. And with that thought comes a question about how maybe you can apply that thought to your life. On Mondays, I put up the Monday morning motivational message, which a lot of times is a video or a story that's a little bit longer. But I understand people's time is at a premium. So I would say if you need a quick hit of inspiration or motivation, go to motivationalcheck.com. And you can leave me a message there. You can get access to my social media sites. You can actually even buy the book there as well. So motivationalcheck.com will get you to me.
Yes, thank you. Again, Terry, I really can't thank you enough. This was such an important conversation. And thank you for, taking time and being with us today. This was awesome. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Eric. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Seriously, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode and on this podcast journey. And if you loved what we talked about today and you know another human who could definitely benefit from what was discussed, I would so appreciate if you would go ahead and share this podcast with them. Don't forget, hit subscribe or follow so you never ever miss an episode. And the great news is you can always follow me, my work, my blog, my podcast on my website at www.wethelight.org. And hey, remember, life is so much brighter when we shine. I'll see you next time.